I want us to hear this. When we get a hold of who we are, everything changes. Everything changes. So I also want you to hear this. What age is it where you get a hold of who you are? 18, right? That's 18. That's when you become a person. I like that. I'm almost a person. I'm telling you, I've known 12-year-olds who know who they are in Christ. I've met 80-year-olds who don't. So don't think it is just, well, I'm older now, I get it. I want us to hear today so clearly that when we understand why the Creator created us, who we are, what we're meant for, all of that stuff, we truly can demonstrate the greatness that He put in us. I'm telling you, He's put greatness in every single one of you. Most believers don't display it. Why? Because they don't believe that God called them to that. They don't believe it. And so if you don't believe that God called you to be great, you never will be at all. So I want to go to Exodus chapter 3. We're going to go there, and we're going to jump to a few other places. Just some real basic scripture, so to say, but I want us to so clearly, my heart is, and I've seen this in my life, I've seen it in life after life after life, that there's not, if there was a way to have us understand what God thought about that, we would do it. But I'm telling you, it's a journey every person has to go on, and it also is supernatural. So it's not just read this chapter, I'll give you a test, you pass the test, you're good forever. It's not that. It is a constant journey seeking after the great God, and it's a constant being molded into His image for this to happen. Of course, there's a moment. A lot of people can point to a moment when they understood God's love, like Annika was sharing. But then that doesn't mean, oh, I got it, boom. One day driving on the car, shoop, felt like, whoa, the love of God came over me. I'm good forever. I don't need to do anything. There's moments, but then we daily build on those moments. And so I want us to go to the person of Moses, because we got to get this, people. God created us, and we need to hear why He created us. We need to hear who we are. You see, when you are, when you're designed, you know, we got to be divine. We're defined by our Creator, right? And we walk in the greatness when we are walking in that design. We're designed by our Creator. I want you to hear this. We're designed by our Creator. Therefore, the Creator dictates who we are. Our greatness comes out when we walk into and embrace that design. What does that mean? That means something different for every single person. You see, God didn't make one style person. This is the right style, and everybody fits that. He didn't. You know what He made? I don't know. How many people are in the world today? 7 billion? What was it last count that you had? A lot. A bunch. 7 billion people. They're all different. This is one of the most amazing things to me. How can they all be different? Even twins are different. We all have a distinct thumbprint. How weird is that? I don't care who you are. If you had to design thumbprints, hey, no way you come up with 7 billion options. We're all different. And we're not just different in some ways. We're really different. I want you to hear this clearly. Diversity is awesome. Now watch the trap we've gotten into. The enemy is sneaky and sharp. By the way, he's been practicing for a long time. So he should be a little better at this than you. So just understand that. But what he's done is he has thrown this diversity thing out there, and he's turned diversity into uniformity. Okay. Uniformity is bad. I am not supposed to be like you. You're not supposed to be like me, and we're not supposed to be like each other. We are supposed to be diverse. We're supposed to be different. We're not supposed to be different, but let's hopefully eventually all get to be the same. No. We're to be different. You know what the ultimate in unity is? Ultimate in unity is when diversity, completely different people, come together for a common goal. But as they're coming together for a common goal, they're keeping their distinctions. Distinction should be there. You know, at the end times when we gather on the Lamb's Supper, there's going to be lots of languages represented. That's good. There's going to be lots of faces and skin colors and hair designs and body shapes, sizes, weirdnesses, goofinesses. They're all going to be there. And we're not going to say, wow, that person's different from me. I wish they'd get a haircut. No. We're going to say, isn't that cool? Look what God did. Look what God did with that. Holy cow. Right? Diversity's awesome. I want you to do this. I want you to, because you know some things about you that are a little bit odd. Whisker odd. Embrace them. You're not going to get rid of them. You're not. You know, whatever. You're 50 years old. You've had this quirk for 50 years. What do you think? It's just going to leave tomorrow? It's who you are. I'm not talking there about sin. I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about saying, well, you know, I just am a habitual murderer. I guess that's just me. No, that is not what I'm talking about. There is absolutely things about us that change, but there are things about us that probably can't. Yeah. And that's okay. You know, you're not going to get shorter or taller. Well, actually, you might get shorter eventually, but you're not going to completely get an extreme, who is this person? You're not. You're going to keep these personalities. You're going to keep the quirks. And I want you to hear, you've got to hear this. Please, please be okay with the uniqueness that God put in you. Some of you are quiet, some of you are loud. Loud people, you can learn from quiet people, but you're not called to be that quiet person. Quiet people, of course, you can speak a little more, but don't try to be like the loud person. It wouldn't be becoming for you. In fact, it would be you. That's truly what a hypocrite is. It's a phony. It's somebody trying to be like somebody else. Listen, the only person you're called to be like is Jesus. How do we become like Jesus? We focus on his greatness. Remember, our focus determines our future. What we see is what we become. But becoming like Jesus, this is the cool thing about Jesus. Becoming like Jesus doesn't mean that the two of you who are so diverse now will become exactly alike. That's not it. Jesus is so cool that we become like him in our uniqueness. We keep our uniqueness and we all become like him. That's cool. I am so thankful that Jesus didn't live in the era of smartphones. Because, I mean, we would have like a bazillion pictures of him, right? And what would we all do? We'd say, let's be like Jesus, so we'd all try to look like him. Isn't it genius that we have no idea what Jesus looked like? I love that. Listen, those pictures that are on most churches and the cool flowing hair, that's fine if you have those. It is highly unlikely that's what Jesus looked like. I know that just ripped into some of your religiosity. It's, yeah, there's the face. What? Next you'll be saying there's no Santa Claus. No tooth fairy. But I want you to hear this. We're not called to be like Jesus in the idiosyncrasies. We're called to be like him in displaying the glory of God. So let's get into Moses and look at these things, because we're in a world that everybody tries to define us. I've never seen, I mean, it's always this way. It's always been this way, and of course, now it's even more so. But let me read this. I got to get to some scripture. Moses, you know, chapter 3, saw the burning bush. We talked about it last week. He saw the burning bush. He gazed at it. He went toward it. He focused on it. His focus determined his future. He focused on the glory of God. And next thing he knows, he is carrying the glory of God to the nations. Focus determines your future. Focus on the glory of God. So then God calls to him. He says, here I am. And then he goes into what he's going to do. And then in verse 11 of chapter 3, Moses asks the question that is the ultimate question that all humanity must ask and must get an answer to if they want to walk in the greatness of God. God goes on to tell him, he says, this is going to happen. I'm going to bring him out. I'm going to come down. I'm going to bring him out of slavery. I'm going to make him into this, that, and the other thing. And he says, now I am sending you to Pharaoh. Bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. So it's like, whoa, I was out tending my sheep. I looked at a bush. Now I got to lead an army out. Moses has the ultimate response to this. He says in verse 11, who am I? Who am I that I should lead these people? Who am I? I love that question. Sometimes I have taught this, and sometimes you could do it this way, but I pick on Moses a little bit and say, hey, we better answer this question. But I want you to hear this. This is the most honest question you can ask. Why me, God? Why me? Why'd you call me? And of course, Moses had a pretty extensive call, but your call is your call, and in your book, it's really significant. And in the grand scheme of things, it's very significant. If you want to fulfill your call, you must be willing to ask, but who am I? Who am I? If you don't know who you are, you'll never fulfill your call. Can't do it. Because here's what will happen. Here's what we all do. We want to be defined. Every person wants to be defined. Every person wants to be defined. Therefore, we will look to all kinds of sources that are trying to define us. Your brother tries to define you. Your sister tries to define you. Here comes the parents trying to define you. Here comes the teachers, the coaches, the friends, the enemies, the advertisements, the cyber bullies, all these people are defining you. And Annika talked about it. Am I a cheerleader? Am I this? Am I that? I'll take this. I'll take that. I'll start putting all the. What we're doing is we put on this coat and this hat, and they'll try this hat on. And I wear another coat, and I put on somebody else's boots, and I'm getting all dressed up in what everybody else thinks I am. When you take on what everybody else thinks you are, couple things happen. One is you become completely unable to function. Imagine if everybody in this room put their coat on you. The other thing, you look like a total fool. Everybody in here sticks a hat on you. What are you, the Mad Hatter? What's going on? You don't look right, and you can't function right when you let everybody else define you. Please hear me clearly. Everybody's trying to define you. Why is everybody trying to define you? Because the one who defines you controls you. Yeah. If you want to know who you're serving, ask yourself, who is defining you? Whoever defines you controls you. Period. You should write that down, let it sink in, whatever, because everybody says, I want to be free, I don't want a master. The people who are saying that have tons of masters, because every single thing and person they allow to define them is controlling them. There is no freedom when you don't know who you are. And so it's easy to pick on those other people, right? I want to speak to believers in Jesus Christ to say that we also don't know who we are. And because we don't know who we are, we can never act like who we should be. We just aren't. We can't get it. So Moses asks this question. He says, who am I that I should do that? And I love how God responds. I would have responded differently, but I'm not God, so praise the Lord. He says, who am I that I should go to Egypt and the Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? And God said, verse 12. Now, if you came in, I'm not even sure they're handed out. Did you guys get little things that say who I am in Christ? Yeah, that's a freebie for you. Take that home and put some time into getting before God and reading through those things. It would have been easy. No, actually, it would have been very difficult for God to do this because there was no Bible written at the time. But it would be easy when somebody says, who am I? to give him that piece of paper. That's why I gave it to you today. It was very easy. I found it online. It's Neil Anderson's things. I hit print. I printed out 100 and some 200. There you got him. So that's easy. But I love how God responded to Moses, because this is the true way to get your identity. When he says, "Who am I?" God said this. He says, "I will be with you." Who am I? I'll be with you. Wait, maybe you didn't hear my question, God. Who am I? Here's my answer. I will be with you. Do you see what he's doing there? He's completely wrapping the identity of Moses into the presence of God. Completely engulfing it. It's not about Moses. It's God will be with him. And out of that comes Moses. Moses was amazing what he did. Incredible. But who was he? What was his resume? I mean, you know this. He was 80 years old at the time. He had an absolute call when he was born. That call turned to, lived in the Pharaoh's house for 40 years. Murdered somebody. That's kind of cool to put on your resume. Ran away, 40 years tending sheep. Mighty man of God, right? No. Nothing. But when God said, "I'll be with you," and Moses embraced that, out of that came Moses. Moses was nothing until God was with him. You want to get your identity, cuddle up to the Creator. You want to know the role of the Creator, the creation, get near the Creator. Allow him to define us. Allow him to design us. And Moses did great and mighty things. I want to go through two other places in the Bible because you just need to hear these two other people. One of them is going to stick with you. I'm saying the same thing through all of them, but one of them is going to stick with you. Go ahead 400, or go back, I guess we are. But going to Joseph, who was Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph was the son there. Joseph, watch this. At age 17 years old, Joseph is given his destiny. He's given a call of greatness. Wow, it was an amazing thing. This guy was going places. He knew it. He was given vision by God at age 17. The next thing that happened was everybody hated him. That's nice, isn't it? I got a call from God. Here we go. I'm stepping out in it. And everybody goes, boom, take that. Call of God. The easiest thing to do is to say, maybe God didn't call me because that hurt. But when you know it's a call of God and you embrace the greatness, there might be some punches, but you'll take them. Because the greatness of God supersedes the opinion of other people. So he goes and he gets thrown, you know the story, he gets thrown into slavery, he gets sold into slavery, he's gone, you know the story, goes into Potiphar's house, he gets arrested, he gets thrown in jail, he gets abandoned in jail all this time, and eventually interprets a dream and becomes prime minister of Egypt. At age 17, I want you to hear this because this is why it's so important to give yourself to reaching young people. At age 17 was the last time he ever had a godly teaching or godly companion or godly encouragement. Ever. 17. That's the end. 17. Hope you got it, Joseph, because you're never getting it again. And he was thrown into paganism and the huge religious cult of Egypt. 13 years later, he became prime minister. Would have been very easy for him to get defined. What was the issue with Joseph? If everybody else was trying to define him, but Joseph would only be defined by his Creator. Got him into trouble. He becomes prime minister, still not defined by prime minister. 7 years later, things are good. 3 years later, his brothers come to him. 20 years after his dream is fulfilled. 20 years. No godly teaching, yet he hung on to the greatness God put in him. Why? Because he chose to be defined by his Creator than by everybody's opinions. And then he went on, obviously, to fulfill all the greatness. And he literally saved the world. What if he had just said, you know what? This greatness in God thing, I'm going to bag it because I don't want to get thrown into a pit. Okay? All of Egypt could have died. Israel would have died. There'd be nothing. But he hung on to it because his Creator's definition of him was greater than anybody else's opinion. And great things ensued. Daniel, the prophet, in the book of Daniel, Daniel was taken into captivity. I don't know if we know exactly when, but he was taken into captivity as a young teenager. So let's just call it 14. At age 14, Daniel received his last Sunday school lesson ever. Ever. Done. Age 14. Last godly teaching he will ever get. But Daniel knew at that point that he was called by God and he was called to greatness. And he knew that God had big things for him. So when he goes into the king's palace, Nebuchadnezzar's palace, when you take somebody into captivity, if you're a king, what's the first thing you do? Change their name. Why? Because if you can define them, you can control them. Most of you don't know this, except you're now looking at it, but Daniel's name means God is my judge, or God is my strength. It's a great name. Anytime you see El at the end of a Hebrew name, that refers to like Elohim or El Shaddai. It's God, okay? And Dan means judge or strength. So his name, Daniel, is God. The Lord is my strength. The Lord is my judge. That's who he was. It wasn't just a name. That's who he was. At age 14, he understood that, and he held on to it. He comes into the king's thing, and he says, you shall be Belteshazzar. Belteshazzar means Baal will protect. The pagan god will protect you. The pagan system, this culture, whatever, will protect you. You know what Daniel said? He said, ain't nobody going to define me except for God is my strength. We don't know his name Belteshazzar because he never received it. Even if people called him that, maybe he responded, but in my head, I like to think him being over here and somebody says, hey, Belteshazzar, he stays like this. Hey, Belteshazzar, he stays like this. Hey, Belteshazzar, Daniel, what? He was not going to let the world define him. And I'm telling you, we as a church, as a whole, when we stop letting the world define us and we only answer to the things that God says about us, we will be different. What did Daniel do? Well, of course, you know the story of Daniel. It's a really cool story. It's amazing, and he's like really awesome. But he didn't receive from that culture. He didn't take in the meat of that culture. He didn't take in, of course, he got trained in their schools and arts, but he didn't take it in. He had to go there, but he wouldn't take it and he wouldn't receive it. He stayed true to God is my judge. God was going to define him. His Creator was going to define him. And because of that, he was able to, and in Daniel 11, I think it's verse 32, one of my favorite verses, you'd think I would know it, says what? I love this verse. Maybe I wrote it down. Yes, here it is. The people who know their God shall be strong and do exploits. That's a cool verse, isn't it? Daniel said, the people who know their God shall be strong and do exploits. Why was Daniel able to do exploits? Because he knew his God. He was defined by his God. Daniel knew who he was. Daniel knew, I'm totally fine to go in and spend a night with the lions. Why? Because my God defines me, not Nebuchadnezzar, not whatever the other kings that he had at that time. They're not going to, Darius, they're not going to define me. Only God is my judge. The Lord is my strength. He was defined by that, and he was able to demonstrate the greatness of God. Here's my challenge for you, and if you guys want to come on up, the worship team, or whoever's coming back up at this time. But I want us to get this. God's called each one of you to greater things than you are currently walking in. And you say, well, I'm doing nothing. Well, then there's greater things than that. You say, wow, I've already changed the world 3 times. There's greater things than that. Wherever you're walking, God's called you to even see greater things happen. He's calling us to greatness. And the way to receive and walk in his greatness is to stare at him, the great, mighty, awesome God, receive from him who we are, and then just take a big step. And you say, what if it goes in the lion's den? Well, maybe it will, maybe it won't. But we would barely know Daniel if he didn't go in the lion's den. Right? So if it goes in the lion's den, it's a time for God to show off. I'm so convinced of this, that we're in a season, I don't know how long the season is. I think it's about a year. But we're in a season where we're going to see God do amazing things. But what's going to be required of us in seeing it happen is we have to walk out who God's called us to be. I really think if I were God, I would be tired of the wimpy church. Be tired of it. Like, man, I give them all the power, I give them all the strength, I give them all the resources, I give them all the insight, I give them all the wisdom, and they just like back up and cower down. And God's much more patient than any of us are, and that's a good thing, or we wouldn't be here. But I just want us to hear, he's asking us to step it up. He's asking us to let him define us. He's saying, you know, I could really help you out if you would just believe me. See, God can do everything, but the one thing that we need to do is step out in belief a little bit. Philippians chapter 4 and verse 13. I like this verse. It says, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. It's a great verse. We hear that, and we always, of course, we say, yes, we believe that. But then we focus on the through Christ who strengthens me, which we should. But one thing we sometimes miss is without me, without you, that verse is not true. It doesn't say God can do all things. What's it say? I can do all things? I'm in that verse. Obviously, through Christ who strengthens me is the way. But don't think you're not in that verse. You're in the verse. It ain't going to happen without you. It just isn't. And so my challenge to myself, my challenge to you as an individual, my challenge to us collectively, again, if I could speak to the region, if I could speak to the nations or whatever it would be this. God's calling you to greatness. He's calling you to greatness. I think the young people that are raising up right now, I believe there's Josephs and Daniels that are in there. I think there are Annikas in there. I think there are a lot of yous people in there. And they're going to receive something in their identity, and they're going to be defined by Christ. It's always hard to be a teenager, but never has the outside definitions been stronger than in this culture right now. So strong. My heart goes out for teenagers. My heart goes out for the young boys out there who are so, I don't even know what the world wants a boy to be. It's so ambiguous. I don't even know what it is. For the young girls out there struggling with, all kinds of identity things, and there are millions of voices, and none of them are true. May God's voice dominate in the definition of us, his creation. So I just want us to go before God for just a couple minutes and reflect on this and begin the process of having him truly define who we are.